Hello and welcome to the gameplay explanation for Sorcerer King. I'm your host Rob, aka Devildog, and I'm here to basically give you a baseline strategy and some starting hints as you begin your Sorcerer King journey, and hopefully help you if you've had some issues. But basically, just here to try to give you a good starting point so that you can enjoy Sorcerer King and start to figure out how to play the game, and like I said, sort of enjoy the journey that you'll be embarking on. So I'm starting here at the Sovereign selection screen because I think that it's a good opportunity to basically suggest two Sovereigns that I think are your best bet for starting Sovereigns. I've got one of them here. His name is Martin. He's a commander, and the commander is very good at amassing armies through the buildup of logistics, and they're also very good at increasing the ability to for those armies to move, so they're able to move faster and have more moves on the strategic map. So they're very good. He also starts with a very good starting hero, Varda the Slayer, and she's very capable because not only is she decently strong in melee, but she's also got some really good skills that are available early in her skill tree. They're basically an ability to teleport with her and her Drake, and as she teleports into a certain spot, she can stun the people around her and eventually also attack them with lightning. So it's a pretty good area of effect spell, and it works really well. So Martin's good because he's pretty straightforward. He builds a lot of armies and he comes at you with a lot of numbers, and he's also got some a good hero. Now, the other starting Sovereign that I'd also suggest is Galor the Wizard. I would suggest him because he actually accumulates mana very well. He starts off with more mana than the other Sovereigns do, and he generates the mana quicker than most, and a lot of his skills end up helping him generate mana as well. And mana is important because it helps you summon units in your cities, and it also helps you cast spells, and you divvy up mana to gain levels as a Sovereign and for research through your spells. So mana is super important, so anyone who can accumulate a lot of mana is going to be very powerful. Not to mention, he also starts with Tandis, who I think is probably neck and neck for the best hero that you can start with. Tandis is a very powerful melee character, and he gets very powerful towards the end. I mean, he becomes a one-man wrecking party. So as long as you suit him right, as long as you basically get the right skills and craft the right weapons and enchant him right, he can be capable of taking out the Sorcerer King himself. He's just very powerful. So that combined with the wizard's ability to generate mana and cast spells and all that stuff really makes him very powerful and makes the combination very powerful. So my suggestion to you, if you've never played or if you're starting fresh and you haven't really figured out the game yet, try the wizard, try the commander. The other four are also very powerful. They're just a little bit more specialized, and they also are a little bit, actually they're significantly, moderately more difficult to figure out if you're not comfortable with this game or you haven't played 4X before. So, wizard or commander. And because I'm going to use this particular episode as sort of a gateway, a platform for my new Let's Play series, and I've already played as the wizard, I'm going to use the commander, and we're going to use him as a default, and we're going to just go ahead and hit next. And here you are with the world setup screen, and there's a couple things that I would suggest to new players. First of all, don't forget that these are all pre-made maps, and there's a selection here to generate a random world, which I think, being a 4X player and being a real big fan of the genre, random worlds are the best place, or the best maps to take on, because you never know what you're going to get, and it's different every time, and it's kind of exciting. You can choose the pre-made maps and sort of start to figure out which ones they are and how they work, so that maybe you can get better, and that might help you sort of learn the ropes of the game. But for me, I'm always going to suggest that you take a random world because it's more fun that way, and I think 4X games are meant to be played that way. Land size, I wouldn't, as a beginner, I wouldn't take arena because you're a little bit too on top of everything. I would suggest small for your land size for a beginning game, or as you start to learn the game. The bigger the map, the more difficult they become, and arena is a little bit more difficult than small just because of how close everything is and how on top of everybody you are. So take small. I'm going to choose small. It's a little bit more conducive to a Let's Play series. With the shards here, I would suggest few, because the fewer the shards, the less shards you're going to have to basically defend. So while you're not going to be able to get as much mana, because each shard you claim you gain mana from, you're not going to be gaining quite as much mana because there's not going to be as many shards, but you're also not going to be having such a hard time defending them. And for each crystal shard that's destroyed, the Sorcerer King adds 20 to your Doomsday counter. And Doomsday's, hopefully you've kind of seen what the Doomsday counter is all about, and if not, we'll talk about it here in just a second. But my suggestion to you is to take on few shards. Common becomes a little bit more difficult, and plentiful it becomes extremely difficult, especially on larger map sizes. Alright, so now we're here at difficulty, and we can start with beginner if you've never ever played a 4X game. Otherwise, I think it's going to be too easy, regardless of whether or not you've played this game or not. If you haven't played this game and you feel like you need to sort of warm up and get into this game and figure out how it is and what's different about it, sure, take easy. It might still be a little too easy for you. Anyone with any 4X experience or is like a min-maxer, I would definitely start with normal and move your way up from there. Normal is going to be a challenge, there's no doubt, but I think it's meant to be a challenge, and you know, you're still going to have some space and some leg room to be able to figure out how to play the game and to spread your wings a little bit. Alright, so now we're down to Doomsday speed. And Doomsday is something I talked about quickly before. Doomsday is the counter in which basically it increases through the Sorcerer King's casting of a spell that basically will make him a god. And so the Doomsday sort of keeps an eye on it. It represents the casting of that spell. It starts at 0, goes up to 500 unless you have changed it, and the number is basically affected by a bunch of different things that happen throughout the game. You're either going to be adding to it through different actions that you make, and sometimes the things you do, and basically things that occur throughout the game are going to reduce the Doomsday. So the idea is to make sure the Doomsday doesn't get to 500. In fact, when it does, the game's over. So your Doomsday speed here is, for somebody who's really brand new to this, should probably be slow. That way you don't feel terribly, I don't know, you don't feel like you're having to rush yourself, and you don't feel too, I don't know, I can't even think of the word, but you're just not, you're not being threatened by the Doomsday counter too much. So slow is a good way to start if you haven't played this game before. Normal is pretty average. It's not going to be too bad, and it's not going to be too easy. And fast is very difficult from my experience. So this is a good way to set up. So to recap, basically, random worlds, unless you want to start taking pre-made maps that you can get used to and help you figure out so that you can get at least a foothold on each map. Land size, stick with small. It's a really good spot for the beginner. And it's actually, in my opinion, small and medium are the funnest games. Shards, go with few. Difficulty, easy or normal. Beginner only if you haven't played 4X ever before. And Doomsday, slow, especially if you're new or you feel like you're being rushed. And normal for every other player. Here we are, we're choosing our rivals here on the screen. So, aside from the Sorcerer's Legacy, which is here, none of them are really anything in particular that I would recommend specifically for gameplay purposes. I mean, I have my favorites because some of them are cooler than others in my opinion, but only Sorcerer's Legacy gives you something that will actually benefit you as a new player, and that is, once you ally with them, they're actually capable of reducing the Doomsday. So choose them if you're new, and then do your best to make sure you ally with them as quickly as possible, because they'll help you out. Difficulty here, this difficulty is different than the difficulty we were talking about before, because the difficulty we were talking about before is actually about the world and the Sorcerer King, whereas this difficulty adjusts the rival's capability of expanding and then their likelihood of siding with the Sorcerer King. So, again, if you're brand new to the genre in general, choose beginner. If you're new to this game, easy. And if you've had a couple games under your belt but you're still not doing very well, try normal. I'm going to leave Sorcerer's Legacy up, but I'm going to let the other two stay at random. Alright, so we're starting the game, and we'll basically initially be given the starting sovereign quest, and these are different for each of the different sovereigns. And this one, basically the commander is one of the Sorcerer King's generals, and he starts to kind of feel like maybe the Sorcerer King's up to no good. And I won't read this to you. I will be reading the rest of the quests, but this basically sets up what your starting bonuses will be. And in this case, you can either raise an army, which will give you a couple extra units. You can stockpile supplies, which will give you a couple, I want to say it's a couple strategic resources, or I prepared my people for the coming war, which gives you some logistics. I'm going to try to raise an army in secret, and I'm going to train a couple archers. This third one here, it actually ends up giving you 3 units, but it increases your threat. And threat's something that is basically measuring the threat that you are against the Sorcerer King, and it goes from 0 to 5, and 0 being no threat, which means the Sorcerer King really doesn't care about you at all. He doesn't see you as any threat whatsoever. 1 and 2, he starts to see you as a threat, but he doesn't really divert too much of his attention to you. 3 and 4, he starts to see you as a threat, and he's starting to divert his attention to you. And 5, he is absolutely certain you are a threat, and he's throwing everything he has at you. So, if you do take the third one here, you do gain 3 units, but you add 1 to your threat, which means basically the Sorcerer King is aware of you and will be kind of keeping an eye on you and keeping you in check a bit. So, I'm going to go ahead and take the archers. I think they're a good complement to the melee units that the commander starts with. So, archer training is difficult to do in secret, but you were able to construct a makeshift target range in the Great Hall of Athica and conduct training by candlelight. This was slow going, and many tapestries gave their life to the cause, but you were eventually able to train a few stout men in the art of working a bow. Aim true, lads. Alright, so now we're here. We've gained 1 courage and archer. Courage, this here attribute, basically you accumulate them through quests and stuff like that, and they work towards different options that you gain in quests later on the line, and also may affect how rival nations look at you. So, we'll go ahead and name it Athica. So first things first, here we are. We're presented with the very beginning of our playthrough here. The very first thing I want you to do when you start a game is select your crystal shard and hit build. So you're basically building you're claiming that shard here, and that's something that a lot of people tend to forget, that they need to go ahead and claim. Despite the fact that it's in your zone of control, it is not yet claimed. And with each crystal shard you claim, you gain mana, and as I said before, mana is super important. So get that done very quickly. Second thing I want you to do when you first start is consider the fact that you should probably enchant your first city. At the very beginning, your starting city starts with 1 essence, as you can see down here. And that basically allows for 1 enchantment on that city. And you gain essences throughout the game, especially as your city levels up and you claim different tiles that have essence in the tile. And with each essence you have, you're able to enchant your city with another spell. There's 3 enchantments that you start off with. I personally think there's only 2 that you should consider, and that's Bountiful Harvest or Enchanted Hammers. Bountiful Harvest will basically add 3 food to that city, whereas Enchanted Hammers adds 3 material. Of the 2, I think food, actually, and we'll come back down before we even talk about that. Enchanted Supplies gives you 1 logistics, but because you're really, really early in this game, the logistics point isn't necessarily as important as adding some of the production or food to your starting city. So, between the 2 of these, you have food and materials. Food will basically allow your city to level up, so the more food that you have in your city, the quicker it'll level up. Whereas, the more materials you have, the more quickly you build stuff, whether it be units or the various buildings that you can build. So there's really only 2 choices here, and I think my opinion is that the only choice really is that you take the food, because it's a significantly less, it's a much less costly mana-wise spell, and because the quicker your city levels up, the more tiles you're able to claim, and the tiles actually have a lot of production in them usually. So, and I'll explain the leveling up process here in a second. So we'll go ahead and enchant our city here. So now it's going to be gaining more food, and as you can see, I gained, you can mouse over and see the food production here. I had 4 before, and then the Bountiful Harvest enchantment gave me 3. So, and this is something I also was talking about just a second ago, was that you can, as your city levels up, you claim nearby tiles, and this is probably something you're already familiar with if you've seen videos of mine, or you just know the game. But each of these tiles, as you start to level up, you can claim them, and they give you bonuses to the city production here. So it's kind of hard to see, but each of these tiles may have some food in them, might have some production in them, occasionally they have some essence in them. And as you claim those tiles, they'll add to these resource totals here. And that's why I say that the quicker you can get your city to level up, the better, because you'll be gaining all of these resources as it is. So while we're here, first order of business when it comes to city production is, in my opinion, always going to be a scout. Scouts are very important in this game, as they are required to obviously look around what's going on, and like finding out what's going on in your surrounding area is super important. It cannot be understated. So basically what it is that you need to make sure that you figure out where all the crystal shards are in the surrounding area. You need to use scouts to take on and claim all the treasure chests that you see here. One's right here, one's right here. You're going to use your scout to take these. And also you want to see where all the strategic resources are in the nearby areas. So they have, I'm trying to think, there's 3 strategic resources, and then a couple resources like this, the clay pit and then wild grain and stuff like that are very important to your city development and to your unit development. So those are something you're going to want to keep an eye on too. Also, with your scouts, you're going to be wanting to scout out where the quest sites are, and also where your enemies are, obviously the rivals, the Sorcerer King, all that. So having a scout is very important, and scouting very early is very important. So what you'll do, because you see these treasure chests, you'll use the scout to get the treasure chests because they're more important. Actually, it's more easy to grab these treasure chests with the scout, and it's also a better use of your unit to grab these treasure chests with your scout than it is to use your heroes. Your hero should be using, or you should be using your hero to grab the quests that you see here. So you're going to be using those to grab, especially the initial quests here, like well, that's medium. It's a medium difficulty quest, but oh wow, there's a couple mediums. The weak ones here that you see, as you can see when you mouse over in the upper right hand corner of that box, it tells you how strong the quest is or how difficult the quest is. And in this case, this quest is a weak quest, and that's what you should be using your starting hero group to be doing, is taking on these quests, because they're usually very bountiful. They're going to be giving you new units, possibly pioneer units and stuff like that are really important. And that's a better use of your hero set, because they're going to be more powerful and more capable of taking on the quests than the scouts are, obviously. So that's all that to say. Take the scout for your first production and get it started. So to recap real quick, first things first, go ahead and claim the shard, and then consider an enchantment on your first city and start the city production with what I would suggest as a scout. The only other thing I could suggest that would make sense is possibly something like a work camp that'll help your production. That's a little less important when you have something like this, which is a clay pit, so close to your city, because this clay pit actually increases your production by 10. So it'll increase my city's production here by 10. So it's not quite as important to have a work camp right off the bat when you can claim this pretty quickly. So next thing, you'll go ahead and this button here, this is actually the end turn button, but when there's something that needs to be done before you can finish your turn, it'll actually have you do that through that button. So in this case, it said research spell because I hadn't done so yet. And there's a few spells that I consider to be really important for your first spell. And right here, there's actually all 3 of them here, which is great. Haste is a very good spell because combat is broken down into rounds. And the higher the initiative for a unit, the more more often they're going to be moving in those rounds. So if you have like a really powerful hero, you can cast initiative on that hero, and he's going to be, or he or she is going to be they're going to be able to move and attack more frequently in each combat round. And that's really important for something that might be a little bit more difficult. You know, you might be up against some enemies that are a little bit harder than the average enemy. You throw initiative on them, and then they're going to be more capable of moving, and they're going to be moving more often, which helps them attack more often, and so on and so forth. It's also a really cheap spell. It's only 4 mana. So this is something you can use pretty frequently, especially when you're caught. Another spell that you'd want to use and consider is Cloud Walk. This helps you teleport your caster to anywhere in your territory. So he can be out, you know, way out on the other side of the map, and you need to get him back to your territory. You use this spell, and they go straight back to your territory, whichever part of your territory you want them to go to. And that's really important for defending your cities. It might be really important because you want to add a unit or something like that to your group, and so on and so forth. So Cloud Walk's also great, and Heal is also very important because Heal is very good at, well, it does what it says it does. It heals your units. So healing your units is super important because there's only a couple other ways to heal your units, and they heal slowly without anything like a spell or a potion. So in order to keep these guys alive, you want them to stay alive, mostly because you can level these up, and as they level up, they gain more strength and they're more capable of staying alive. So healing them after every fight, or at least, you know, considering healing them after every fight, is very important to this game, especially moving forward and trying to keep your party together so that they remain strong, or that they get stronger. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take heal. The only other time that I wouldn't take heal is occasionally, because every time you finish one of these spells, the spell book kind of shuffles, and you gain, you actually have the opportunity to research spells that weren't here before. And occasionally, when you have something like this, a rare tactical spell, or a rare spell in general, because rare spells, let's try that again. Rare spells are rare, so they're not always going to be available to research. So occasionally, when I see a rare spell that I really like, this is one of them, I will go ahead and take it because it's more likely that I'll see Heal, Cloud Walk, or Haste later. However, in this case, with the commander and his lower than average mana stores, and really honestly, it's more important to me to keep my units healed right now than it is to be blasting enemies with ice. I'm going to go ahead and keep Heal as my first choice. Okay, so before we actually wrap this initial episode up, I wanted to talk about the mana wheel here. As I was saying before, the more mana you generate, the more everything works. So right now we have, it looks like 8 mana per turn, and that's as a result of the crystal shard that we've now claimed. So that's bringing us 8 mana per turn, and we can divvy that mana up into 3 separate categories. And we can use this cursor here to do that with. You can move it left into the blue, and that's going to increase your skill, which is basically XP for your sovereign. And each time your sovereign levels up, you gain a skill, and you can actually take a look at the sovereign tree here. So with the commander, you're going to be gaining max size. You're going to be gaining slots for the max size of your armies, and also the ability to move more and farther. And then you also have stuff like the ability to add to your logistics and so on and so forth. And each of the sovereign skill trees are very different. So adding to the skill will allow your sovereign to level up faster. The lore over here in the green, that allows your research to happen faster, so you'll be able to research spells much quicker. And in the purple, mana is just basically adding to this mana here. So the mana that you use to not only cast spells, but summon units and stuff like that, that's where that mana goes and comes from. So just an idea, because most people don't actually consider this orb. It is something that you should consider occasionally, especially if you're really eager to cast a spell. You might want to move into the purple for a little bit more, or if there's a skill in your sovereign tree that you're really excited about, go ahead and divvy up a little bit more into your skill line. So that being said, I think that's pretty much a good starting point for the game. Um, I do have a Let's Play that's starting, so it will be a slightly different game, but it is the commander, and he he and I will basically be, I mean, he and I and she, because we're with Varda too, but we're all going to be going through a full Let's Play, and hopefully along the line, you'll see some stuff. If you haven't really gotten too comfortable with the game or too familiar with it, you'll be able to see some stuff. I might be able to impart some knowledge, but I'll make it sort of like a Let's Learn series so that I kind of focus on learning points and stuff like that. So it might help you with your playthrough. The other thing that I had asked or had been asked is how you can pass turns. Now, it's not necessarily very obvious how to pass turns, but if you're in a spot where like maybe you wanted to keep him here and you don't want to do anything else, you can actually hit guard, which will just basically idle this unit until you select them again, or you can hit pass down here, which just basically skips that army's turn. So that was asked, and I want to make sure that I pointed that out on how to do that. So, unless you guys have any questions, which I'm happy to answer, leave them in the comments if you do. We'll go ahead and start our Let's Play, so stick around, watch my Let's Play, I should say, and we'll go through the whole series and hopefully beat it, and in the meantime, and while we're doing that, hopefully teach you a thing or two. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask, and thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. The one other thing that I will say is, as far as your starting strategy goes, and this is something that I'll probably talk about a little bit more in my Let's Play, is that if you you aggressively seek out crystal shards, you're gonna have an easier time of it. So this crystal shard here, it would be in my best interest to claim it as quickly as possible, because the more shards you have, the more mana you generate, and as I said, mana is everything in this game. So with those scouts that I've suggested that you train quickly and early, you'll use those to scout out those crystal shards and get to them as soon as possible. So if there's a crystal shard right here or maybe farther back up, I'd grab this one with the pioneer as soon as I could, and then this one here that I find, I'd grab it as soon as I could, and basically create like a daisy chain of crystal shards, because not only they're going to help you with the mana generation, but with each outpost that you build on or by a crystal shard, that generates a road, and the roads are really helpful to get around and help making your army movement a lot quicker. So that's probably your best bet as far as a general strategy moving forward. Obviously with stuff like this, with the clays and the clay pits and the wild grains and stuff, they're important, but they're not nearly as important as getting these crystal shards and having them defended and claimed as early as possible. So use that as your strategy. Be aggressive, get them, claim them, throw pioneers out there to get those taken care of, and yeah, that should help. I really think that should be a good starting point for any strategy that you have. But like I said, stick around. We have a Let's Play starting, and you'll see me kind of aggressively grabbing up these crystal shards. Alright, thanks guys. We'll see you in the next episode, or see you in episode 1 of our Let's Play. Bye.